Hey, welcome. I'm Kevin Zimmerman, of course, of Unlocking Black History on YouTube. And thank you for joining me. Please make sure, though, that if you are going to be joining us here, I want to be able to know who you are. I actually had it in there. Let's see, welcome. I want you to give us your name and where you're from. So yes, if you're on here, if you're joining us, please give us your name and let us know where you are from, because I'd like to know. Uh, Once again, I'm sure unless anyone has been living under a rock, the major conversation that's been taking place ever since last Thursday is the Supreme Court's ruling of rolling back our voting rights protections. And I think I have to reemphasize this once again. My whole primary goal, even for starting Unlocking Black History on YouTube, was to highlight the plight of Blacks in America. And a lot of that focus came when it was expressed and demonstrations were manifested that America was serious about erasure. They were serious about erasing our Black history, or making efforts to do that. And of course, we know that that was not going to be allowed to happen. But this is what I felt I could do to ensure that our history is not erased. That's important to understand, because some people may come on here and I'm able to provide you with some vital information regarding the plights of Blacks in America, and you can get deterred by hearing political language and political discussions. But I have to tell you that it is impossible to separate the political climate from the plight of Blacks in America. And in order for you to be able to have a knowledgeable and educated discussion on the matter, I believe that I can provide you with information on this channel to be able to help you have those discussions. Again, I share often. I was born in 1960. When I came into the world, Black people did not have the right to vote. We didn't even have civil rights, let alone voting rights. And we fought long and hard to get to the point where we could. Now, here I am, 66 years old, and everything that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Fannie Lou Hamer, and so many others fought for have just been totally ignored. So, in today's live stream, I'm going to be sharing with you some of the examples along the way of where it was the United States Supreme Court that stepped in to put in front of us the barriers that would make it difficult for Blacks in America to be treated as equal as whites in America or anyone else. So I'm going to show you where the United States Supreme Court stepped in along the way. And what helped a great deal was, over the past weekend, I was listening to a man that I highly respect, and that's Professor Eddie Glaude, who's a professor at Princeton. And Eddie Glaude shared some things that resonated deeply with me. And he said these words: when will folks get tired of disrespecting, or when will we get tired of folks disrespecting our dead? And he asked a question: do you know how many people, how many bodies are laying in the bottoms of rivers in Mississippi? And guess what? Elsewhere, solely because they tried to vote. Do you know how many bodies are laying in the bottom of rivers in Mississippi and elsewhere solely because they tried to vote? We have people today, obviously, with a white superiority ideology in our government that are playing fast and loose with our dead. They're playing fast and loose with the sacrifices that we've made. They think they own freedom and that they can give it to us and take it away at any given time they want to. I need to make sure that I emphasize the importance of this matter. America has come a long way, but gradually we've been seeing steps go backwards. And I'm going to show you some of these steps in this live stream. I'm going to show you when I share with you how racism doesn't disappear. Racism simply evolves. It evolves with the time. And I'm going to make sure that I use the plight of Blacks in America to be able to demonstrate this reality. And just because we now see that we have Black people that are in the wealthy 1%, just because we see Black people who have become CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, just because we see Black people outside of the red line districts of the inner cities living into the suburbs, just because we see Black people graduating from Ivy League schools, just because we see Black people who are business owners, doesn't mean that we're not wrestling still with the issues and the demons that were unleashed at the inception of our country. Remember, they claim that America is the great American experiment. That's what this is. Experiment meaning, how can we have a diverse culture? Because when you look at America, that's what you find. How can we have a diverse culture with white Americans, Black Americans, Native Americans, Asians, Indians? How do you have all these cultures and govern the country in such a way that they're able to live harmoniously amongst each other? And I can tell you, based on the decision that was just recently made, we're failing. We've done well, but we're starting to fail more than we've ever failed before. We're starting to trend in that direction. I often say two things can be true at the same time. On the one hand, America can be the greatest nation on earth. But on the other hand, she can also be the racist nation on earth. So now, let me start with this. Let me start with the Dred Scott decision, because I'm starting here because let's remember, go back to the revolution, the Great American Revolution, when America wanted to free herself from England, and America wanted to be an independent country. You know, the Great Revolution is where from that was is what produced the Constitution that stated that all men were created equal and they were endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. That amongst these is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's written in the Constitution. But when we look at the 1846 Dred Scott decision, Dred Scott was an enslaved Black man who sued for his freedom in Missouri, after living with his owners in free territory, and those areas where he lived, Illinois and Wisconsin, those were areas where slavery was prohibited. But after an 11-year battle in the courts, it culminated in the 1857 Supreme Court ruling. And in that ruling, it stated that Black people, enslaved people, were considered property. Okay, that's what happened in Dred Scott's ruling. It came that enslaved people were considered property. Black people were not citizens, therefore had no rights to sue. And it effectively declared the Missouri Compromise unconstitutional. And of course, I'm going to be sharing some information with you here, and I'm going to be asking that you take this information. If you're not knowledgeable of it already, it's imperative that you make your own notes and then go back, do some studying so that you can become knowledgeable and share that same degree of knowledge with the people around you, as well as those coming up in the next generation. Because I can assure you what happened last Thursday with the rolling back of and basically gutting the Voting Rights Act, that's going to be in the history books. And if we want the true story to be told of American history, we have a chance now where we get to contribute to what's being said about the time. And we want to be able to tell Black children, people of color, and anybody else who's not in that category that's willing to listen to all of the information, and not information just being funneled out of white society about what happened here. Then we have to tell our story. But when we tell our story, we have to be knowledgeable, we have to be educated, and we have to be factual. One thing that I want us to remember, what was said during the Dred Scott decision, and I'm going to ask you to remember what I'm saying here and compare that to what's taking place now. Judge Taney wrote that the Black man, neither free nor enslaved, had no right that the white man was bound to respect. Once again, it was written by Judge Taney in the Dred Scott decision that the Black man, neither free nor enslaved, had no rights that the white man was bound to respect. It's very important that you remember that, because when we get further down the road in this live stream, I'm going to bring you back to that statement. Now, fast forward, we move on to the Reconstruction era. And during the Reconstruction era, you heard me say it once, you'll hear me say it 1,000 times. You will see that was the era by which we thought that America was going to try and become a democracy. We really, really did. We thought during Reconstruction that's what was going to take place. However, comes the Slaughterhouse case, the Slaughterhouse case of 1873. And in the Slaughterhouse case, the Supreme Court steps in. And what was they ruling? The ruling in the Slaughterhouse case was this: that the 14th Amendment, and you do your own homework. I've given you plenty of information here, but it's important that you know what it was, what it says for yourself. They ruled that the 14th Amendment only protected, hear me, federal rights, not states' citizenship rights. What that meant was the court limited federal power to protect freed men, which opened the door for Jim Crow. It was this decision that created the precedents limiting the federal intervention against state level abuses, facilitating the rise of segregation, hear me, in the South. That's very important for you to remember. And if you need to rewind this, please rewind it and listen to that again, because you heard me say in a previous statement, Judge Taney wrote that a black man, free or enslaved, had no right that the white man was bound to respect. Yeah, and I know he said it back in the 1800s, but I want you to see the parallel between the 1800s and the 21st century. Then we saw, as we moved into Reconstruction, the federal court stepped in and said, no, 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 no. In that issue, need to understand that that's not the federal government's responsibility. The states have the right to govern however possible, and that decision created a precedent limiting federal intervention against state level abuses, facilitating the rise of segregation throughout the South. Keep that in mind as we move forward. Because as we move forward, you're going to see how these things have evolved. Because we then battle through, we find ourselves battling through Jim Crow. We find ourselves finally getting to the civil rights era. And you don't need me to tell you, I'm sure you understand, during the civil rights era, we have the rise of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. visits John F. Kennedy in the White House, takes the photo op. America sees that the American federal government is aligning with the civil rights movement led at that time by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But please know that it wasn't just Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that was leading the effort for civil rights. Hundreds of people were leading, thousands of people were leading the efforts toward civil rights. He was the point person who actually took the approach of the non-violent approach towards obtaining civil rights. Then he takes this photo op in the White House with JFK. He, along with other members of the civil rights movement, that shortly thereafter, or some time thereafter, he takes that photo op, and America sees that the American government is aligning with civil rights for all Americans. JFK gets assassinated. After JFK gets assassinated, the hate doesn't stop. Thereafter, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was leading the civil rights movement, gets assassinated. Nevertheless, when JFK got assassinated, Lyndon B. Johnson authorizes the Civil Rights Bill. And after he authorizes the Civil Rights Bill in 1964, he then authorizes or signs the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Make this note if you haven't made it already. It was not until then that America truly became a democracy. Again, it was not until the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that America truly became a democracy at the signing of the Voting Rights Act, because then now an American citizen can take part and have their voices heard in the democratic process. We got an opportunity to say what representative we wanted to have in our government to speak on behalf of our issues. Who could we elect that's also not only going to govern on behalf of the country, but they're not going to leave out Black America either. So America honestly did not become, and I know, just a couple of months here, we're going to be celebrating America 250. But I'm going to tell you that America did not become a diplomatic society, didn't become a democracy on the behalf or from the vantage point of Black America until the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And so we get excited here. We like, okay, wow, we're starting to move into the right direction. And then comes Grove City College versus Bell in 1984. So in Grove City College versus Bell in 1984, the Supreme Court narrowly interpreted Title IX, the Title IX ruling that, and they ruled that federal anti-discrimination laws only applied to the specific program receiving funding, not the entire institution. In other words, this limited the ability of Black students and others to combat systemic discrimination in education, as institutions could receive federal funding, that aid, while practicing segregation or discrimination in any other areas. So once again, when we think that equality has been met, it was the federal government that stepped in and said, no, Black people can still be discriminated against, but the institution can still be rewarded. Because as long as Black people cannot prove that the end state was deliberate discrimination, then I'm sorry, things will be the way that they are. If you thought we had overcome that, then we have what happened last week when the Supreme Court ruled in a 6-3 decision that virtually gutted the Voting Rights Act. And I showed it to you last week. If you want to, you can go back and you can do your own research on, okay, what was the Voting Rights Act? What did it say? In essence, it said that you cannot discriminate on the grounds of segregation. You can't discriminate on the grounds of someone being Black, white. You can't discriminate in any shape, form, or fashion and deny someone the opportunity to vote based on discriminatory actions. That got rolled back, folks. It got rolled back last Thursday. And so here we are, once again, tired, but we can't get weary. Yes, we will organize once again. Yes, we will strategize once again. Yes, we will overcome. once again. But for me, no one will ever be able to tell me that America is not only one of the greatest nations on earth, she's not one of the most racist nations on earth. Because why was the Civil Rights Act put in place in the first place? Why was the Voting Rights Act put in place in the first place? Now, here's what I want you to take into consideration. How long have we all heard the statement that the wheels of justice move slow and that progress takes time? How long have we heard that? Nevertheless, it wasn't until last Thursday that the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, and immediately, all across the South, they began enacting racially motivated gerrymandering maps. And what that does is silence the voices of the Black community immediately. Now, all this time we've been fighting from slavery through Reconstruction, from Reconstruction through Jim Crow, from Jim Crow through civil rights. All this time we've heard nothing but the wheels of government moves slow and progress takes time. It hasn't even been 7 days, and southern states are already moving to redraw districting maps to silence Black voices already. I asked you earlier in this live stream to make sure you wrote down the statement made by Judge Taney in the Dred Scott decision. Back in 1800s, he said that the Black man had no rights, free nor slave, that the Black man, need he be free or enslaved, had no rights, that the white man is required to honor. That was a mentality. Here we are in 2026. The Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act has been passed. It said there should be no discrimination. But now the Supreme Court comes once again, and says, no. You can still discriminate. Why? Because we have a white superiority mentality and we have the power. And it's 2026. You remember when I shared with you, I said, remember back then in the past, in the Slaughterhouse decision, what was going to happen throughout the entire South. When that decision was made, that ruling was made, that no, the federal government cannot intervene when it comes to states' rights. Well, guess who's moving swiftly to remove the voices of Black people in America? Southern states. So if you review this live stream, I've given you enough here to study, research, make notes, and find time to educate those that are around you of the evolution of these practices that are implemented and has always been implemented within the United States, and make sure you teach our next generation what to look for, what to see so that they'll know how to navigate, because we've always overcome them and we always will. But it is a shame that we're still having to. And so please know, now that this is where we're in, I do know that the intent of Unlocking Black History going live stream was to highlight the movies that you will have seen that came out, because I release a video every Sunday, and I like to make I wanted the intent was to make some points, key points regarding the video, but this is too important to be overshadowed, and we have to do this. So don't get too discouraged. I know you're tired. I'm tired too. Let's not get weary. We must get off the couch. We must mobilize. We must organize, and we must vote. And we must vote in mass numbers in order to reverse this nonsense that we're still seeing in 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, that's my time. I look forward to seeing you again next Monday. Take care.